From the moment they wake up in the morning until they finally fall asleep at night. And even then, even in the moments between consciousness and sleep, where the mind loosens its grip on the defenses they've spent all day constructing and maintaining, the avoidant person is thinking about you, thinking about what they did, thinking about how they treated you, replaying specific moments where they pushed you away, or went cold or disappeared, or said something cruel, or failed to show up when you needed them. And this is an occasional fleeting thought that passes through their mind and dissolves without impact, but is persistent, torturous mental presence that they cannot escape, cannot silence, cannot rationalize, away no matter how desperately they try to construct narratives that would make their behavior justified or understandable or necessary. Not a single day passes without them confronting what they did to you, without the memory of your face when they hurt you, without the echo of conversations where you told them exactly how their behavior was affecting you, and they either dismissed what you said, or withdrew further, or made excuses that they now recognize were transparent defenses designed to avoid accountability for pain they were inflicting on someone who loved them. The guilt is constant. The regret is pervasive. The mental replay of specific moments where they chose their comfort over your heart is relentless and uninvited and impossible to shut off, despite every strategy they employ to distract themselves or to minimize what happened or to convince themselves they made right choice. They try everything, staying busy, filling their time with other people and activities, telling themselves the relationship wasn't right anyway, focusing on your flaws to justify their behavior, reminding themselves they needed space and that their withdrawal was self-protective. But none of these strategies work because somewhere beneath all the defensive narratives they're constructing, they know the truth. They had someone who loved them genuinely, who saw them clearly, who was patient with their wounds and understanding of their patterns, and they destroyed that by choosing fear over love, by letting their defenses win every single time they mattered most, by treating the most important person in their life as if that person was disposable, when actually that person was irreplaceable. And now that person is gone, and the absence of them is a wound that heals nothing, and no day passes where the avoidant doesn't feel the full weight of exactly what they lost and exactly what their behavior cost them. The specific moments throughout their day where you invade their thoughts uninvited. The avoidant person doesn't think about what they did at convenient scheduled times they can manage and control. The thoughts arrive uninvited throughout their day, triggered by specific moments and sensory experiences that bypass their defenses entirely, pulling them back to memories they'd rather forget and confronting them with feelings they'd rather never acknowledge. They think about you the moment they wake up because mornings were once shared, and now morning feels empty in ways sleep cannot fix. Before the relationship ended, or before things became irreparably damaged, mornings had different quality. There was someone to text when they woke up, someone who might be beside them, someone whose good morning message might be waiting on their phone. Now they wake up, and the first conscious thought is absence. The bed is empty, or the phone has no messages from you, or the morning lacks the warmth that your presence brought, without them ever acknowledging how much that warmth mattered while it existed. This morning, confrontation with your absence happens before they've had time to construct defenses, before they've put on the psychological armor they'll wear for rest of the day. In that raw, undefended morning moment, the regret hits them with force. They spend the entire day trying to manage and contain. Morning is where the guilt begins fresh each day, reminding them before they've even fully woken that what they did and who they lost isn't something they've moved past, but is ongoing wound that reopens with the first light. They think about you during their commute or drive, because being alone with their thoughts, without distraction, is exactly the condition their mind uses to force confrontation with what they did. The avoidant fills their life with noise, podcasts, music, phone calls, anything that prevents silence. But even with these distractions, their mind breaks through during commute, during drive, during any transition between activities where attention isn't fully occupied. A song comes on that reminds them of moment you shared. They pass restaurant where you ate together. They drive past neighborhood where you lived. These sensory triggers bypass whatever mental distraction they've constructed and pull them instantly back to specific memory of you, specific moment where they saw how much you cared and responded with withdrawal, specific conversation where you expressed need they couldn't meet and they felt the guilt they've been carrying since. The commute becomes daily gauntlet of involuntary memories they must navigate before reaching wherever they're going, and they arrive at destination already carrying weight of confrontation with what they did that hasn't even fully begun for the day. They think about you when they accomplish something, because every achievement now feels hollow without you as witness. They get promotion, finish project, receive praise, achieve goal they've been working toward, and instead of feeling satisfaction, they feel emptiness. Because you were the person they'd have told first. You were a person whose pride in them would have made accomplishment feel meaningful. You were a person who genuinely cared about their success and whose celebration of it felt more valuable than any external recognition. Achieving something without you to share it with reveals how much meaning you provided that they didn't recognize while you were providing it. The accomplishment triggers specific regret. I had someone who would have celebrated this with me. I destroyed that. Now I succeed alone, and it means nothing. This hollow feeling during what should be positive moments is daily reminder that what they did cost them not just relationship, but their capacity to experience genuine joy in their life. They think about you when they see couples together, in grocery store, walking down street, sitting in restaurants, because seeing what you had together, seeing what they destroyed, makes abstract regret suddenly, viscerally painful. The avoidant has become hyper-aware of couples in public spaces. They notice hands held together, small, intimate moments between people who've built life together, the easy comfort of two people who've chosen each other and maintained that choice. Each couple they observe is mirror showing them what they had and what they lost through their own patterns. They remember specific moments like these with you, walking together, sitting together. Those ordinary moments that felt unremarkable while happening, but now feel like precious memories of life they destroyed through their inability to sustain what was offered to them. Seeing other people living in the love they once had doesn't create jealousy. It creates crushing regret that they had exactly this and couldn't hold on to it because fear drove every choice they made. They think about you when they're trying to fall asleep because nighttime strips away every defense and every distraction, leaving them alone with truth they've been running from all day. The avoidant lies in bed, and every strategy they employed throughout the day to avoid thinking about you dissolves. The darkness and the silence and the absence of distraction create perfect conditions for their mind to replay what they did. They think about your face when they went cold. They replay conversation where you told them you couldn't do this anymore. They remember the last time you looked at them with love, before love was replaced by hurt or by the quiet resignation of someone who finally accepted they were being treated as less than they deserved. Sleep becomes difficult because the mind won't quiet, won't stop replaying, won't stop showing them exactly what they destroyed and exactly what their behavior cost them and exactly what kind of person they revealed themselves to be through their choices. The nighttime is where the full, undefended weight of their regret settles, and they lie there unable to sleep, unable to escape, unable to do anything except sit with the full, crushing reality of what they did to someone who loved them. They think about you when they encounter anything that reminds them of your laugh, your kindness, your patience, your specific way of being in the world that was unique to you and that no one else they've ever encountered comes close to replicating. Something triggers memory of your laugh. A friend laughs similarly. They hear tone on television that sounds like you. And suddenly, they're transported back to moments where you were laughing with them, where your joy was infectious, where your presence made everything lighter and more worth experiencing. These sensory-triggered memories are particularly painful because they're involuntary and because they remind them not just that you're gone, but of the specific quality of your presence that made their life better in ways they failed to appreciate while it was happening. The regret in these moments isn't abstract, it's specific and visceral, tied to exact sensory memories of who you were and how you made them feel when they were capable of letting themselves feel anything at all. They think about you when they're around other people who genuinely care about them, because every caring interaction reminds them that you cared and they didn't honor that caring appropriately. A friend expresses concern about how they're doing. A family member asks about their life. A colleague shows kindness. Each expression of care triggers comparison to how you cared, more deeply, more consistently, more genuinely than anyone else in their life has ever cared. And each comparison triggers specific regret about how they treated that exceptional caring. With withdrawal, with emotional unavailability, with patterns that communicated your care didn't matter enough to change their behavior. Receiving care from others highlights exactly how poorly they received care from you, making every small act of kindness from anyone else a reminder of the greatest kindness they ever received and how thoroughly they failed to deserve it or honor it. What exactly they're replaying and why they cannot stop. The mental torture. The specific content of what the avoidant replays in their mind reveals the particular moments and conversations that haunt them most intensely. Understanding what they're replaying reveals why these specific memories refuse to release their psychological grip. They replay the moment you first told them honestly how their behavior was hurting you, the conversation where you tried to explain what their withdrawal was doing to you, and they're haunted by their own response in that moment. Whether they dismissed what you said, whether they deflected and blamed you, whether they withdrew further instead of listening. This conversation is burned into their memory with painful clarity because it was a moment where you offered them chance to change, chance to hear you, chance to respond differently, and they didn't take it. They replay their own words, the excuses they made, the deflections they employed, the way they turned your vulnerability about being hurt into conversation about their need for space. And they see now with excruciating clarity how cruel their response was, how dismissive, how utterly inadequate to the moment you were offering them. They cannot stop replaying this because they cannot change what they said. The words are permanent, the response is permanent, and the replay is their mind torturing them with the knowledge that they had chance to be different and chose not to be. They replay specific moments where you were vulnerable with them, sharing your fears, expressing your feelings, opening your heart. And they remember exactly how they responded and how their response either honored or destroyed that vulnerability. They think about the time you cried in front of them and they didn't know what to do, and they withdrew instead of staying present. They think about the night you told them you loved them and they couldn't say it back, and they watched your face as hope shifted to hurt. They think about the morning after intimate night together when they felt the pull to create distance, and they saw you sleeping peacefully, and they knew what they were about to do: go cold, create space, pull back. And they did it anyway, because fear was stronger than their desire to be worthy of the trust you were showing them. These replayed moments of your vulnerability, followed by their inadequate response, are particularly torturous because they reveal the gap between what you deserved and what you received. Gap that was entirely their choice to maintain. They replay the ending. However, the relationship ended, whether through dramatic conversation, or through gradual fade, or through your final goodbye message, or through the silence that followed your decision to stop pursuing. They replay the last words exchanged. They replay your face in that final moment. They replay whether you left angry or sad or resigned or simply done. They replay whether they said anything meaningful in that moment or whether they let it end without acknowledging what was being lost. The ending is replayed most frequently because it's the point of no return, the moment where everything that came before became permanent. All the hurt, all the withdrawal, all the missed chances to be different became final when the ending occurred. They replay it, searching for the moment they could have changed the outcome, the words they could have said, the choice they could have made differently, even though they know intellectually that by the ending the damage was done and no words in that moment could have undone it. They replay moments where you showed them grace, where you forgave behavior that should have been unforgivable, where you gave another chance when you should have walked away, where your patience and understanding exceeded anything they deserved. These replays are particularly painful because they reveal the gap between what you gave them and what they gave you. You gave grace, you gave patience, you gave chances, you gave understanding, they gave withdrawal, they gave cold behavior, they gave excuses, they gave patterns they knew were hurting you, and they continued anyway. Replaying your grace alongside their response reveals the profound asymmetry of the relationship. You were consistently generous, while they were consistently self-protective. And this asymmetry is difficult to face because it proves they weren't worthy of what you offered while you were offering it. They replay conversations where you tried to understand their patterns, where you expressed genuine curiosity about their withdrawal rather than anger, where you attempted to help them see their behavior clearly. And they remember how they responded to your understanding with more defensiveness, more withdrawal, more resistance. You were trying to help them. You were offering insight, offering compassion, offering pathway toward change. And they responded by becoming more defended, more distant, more resistant to the very help you were offering. Replaying these moments reveals that you were essentially offering them the exact thing they needed: understanding, clarity, compassion, and they rejected it because accepting it would have required them to face their wounds honestly, which was more terrifying than losing you entirely. They destroyed the best thing in their life rather than facing the wounds driving their destruction of it. They replay ordinary moments, mornings together, evenings on couch, walks you took, meals you shared, because these seemingly insignificant moments have become the memories that hurt most intensely. At the time, these moments felt unremarkable. They didn't recognize them as precious while they were living them. They were too busy managing their fear and maintaining their defenses to be fully present in moments that were actually extraordinary in their ordinariness. Now, replaying these moments, they see what they couldn't see then. How rare it was to have someone willing to share ordinary life with them. How precious daily companionship was when they had it. How much meaning existed in moments they didn't think to value. The replay of ordinary moments hurts because ordinariness was gift they didn't recognize as gift until it was gone. They replay moments where they chose withdrawal over connection. The times they could have stayed present but chose to create distance. The times they could have responded with warmth but chose coldness. The times they could have been vulnerable but chose to defend. Each of these choice points is replayed with recognition that they had option, that staying present was available to them, that warmth was choice they could have made, that vulnerability was possible even though it was terrifying. The replay reveals that their destructive behavior wasn't inevitable, it was chosen. Not consciously chosen with full understanding of consequences, but chosen nonetheless. They had capacity to respond differently in those moments, and they didn't. And replaying those moments now with clarity they lacked then creates regret that cannot be resolved because the choices are made, the moments have passed, and no amount of regret can undo choices that have already destroyed what mattered most. How the guilt and regret is eating them alive in ways they'll never admit to anyone. The avoidant person's guilt and regret about what they did to you isn't something they express openly or process healthily. It's consuming them internally in ways they hide from everyone, while it systematically destroys their peace, their relationships, and their capacity to move forward. Understanding how this hidden guilt manifests reveals the depth of their suffering. The guilt manifests as inability to enjoy anything fully, because every moment of pleasure is contaminated by awareness that they destroyed someone's trust while claiming to need protection. They go out with friends and laugh, but beneath the laughter is persistent awareness of what they did. They watch show they enjoy but cannot fully lose themselves in it, because part of their mind is simultaneously replaying conversation where you expressed how their behavior was affecting you. They eat meal they like, but food doesn't taste the same because their appetite is affected by guilt they cannot name or express. Every positive experience is halved by the guilt running underneath it, making life feel muted and inadequate compared to how it felt when you were in it and before they fully understood the damage they were causing. They cannot experience full joy because full joy requires clean conscience, and their conscience is anything but clean. The guilt manifests as difficulty sleeping that they attribute to stress or anxiety, but that actually stems from the replaying that occurs every night when defenses are down. They tell themselves they're stressed about work, about finances, about life circumstances. They might even seek medication for sleep or anxiety. But the root cause of their sleeplessness is the nightly confrontation with what they did, the replaying, the regret, the recognition that they hurt someone who didn't deserve to be hurt. They cannot admit this is cause of their sleep problems because admitting it would require acknowledging the guilt they're trying to manage through denial and distraction. So they attribute poor sleep to other causes, while the actual cause, their conscience refusing to let them rest until they fully face what they did, continues operating beneath their awareness or beneath what they're willing to acknowledge. The guilt manifests as irritability with others who haven't done anything wrong, because the anger they feel toward themselves for what they did has nowhere safe to go. They snap at friends over minor things. They're impatient with family members who don't deserve impatience. They're critical of co-workers in ways that aren't warranted by circumstances. This irritability isn't about the people they're directing it toward. It's self-directed anger about their own behavior, about who they revealed themselves to be through how they treated you, about the fact that they had extraordinary person who loved them, and they destroyed that through patterns they could have addressed if they'd been willing to face their wounds. The anger has to go somewhere, and since they can't direct it toward themselves without confronting the guilt they're avoiding, it gets misdirected toward others who are convenient targets for frustration that actually belongs to their own conscience. The guilt manifests as hypervigilance about how they treat others now, overcorrecting in other relationships in unconscious attempt to atone for how they treated you. They're suddenly more attentive to friends, more responsive to family, more present in professional relationships than they were before. They're checking in on people, asking how others are doing, being more emotionally available than has been their pattern. This isn't genuine transformation. It's guilt-driven compensation where they're trying to be better person in other areas because being better person in the area that mattered most, their relationship with you, is no longer possible. They can't make amends to you, can't undo what they did, can't go back and respond differently in those crucial moments. So they channel the guilt into being better elsewhere, which provides temporary relief, but doesn't resolve the actual guilt because the actual guilt is specifically about you and what they did to you, not about how they treat others. The guilt manifests as physical symptoms they attribute to other causes: headaches, stomach problems, muscle tension, immune system weakness, that are actually stress responses to the chronic guilt they're carrying without processing or expressing. Their body is holding the guilt even when their mind is trying to rationalize it away. The chronic stress of carrying unprocessed guilt creates physiological effects that manifest as symptoms they treat with medication or lifestyle changes that address surface symptoms without addressing underlying cause. They see doctor about persistent headaches. Doctor suggests stress management or medication, and they comply. But headaches persist because the stress causing them isn't about their job or their schedule or their general life circumstances. It's about the specific unprocessed guilt about how they treated you, guilt that sits in their body as chronic activation that no amount of lifestyle modification can resolve without actually facing and processing the guilt itself. The guilt manifests as comparing every new person they encounter romantically to you and finding everyone profoundly lacking, which they interpret as difficulty moving on, but which is actually guilt about having destroyed the best option they ever had. They date someone and the person is nice, is available, is willing to be present and consistent in ways you wanted them to be. But the guilt about you makes it impossible to invest because they know they destroyed someone better, someone more meaningful, someone who understood them at deeper level. Every new person feels like consolation prize that confirms what they lost was irreplaceable. This comparison isn't just about missing you. It's about guilt making every new person feel undeserved. They don't believe they've earned another relationship with someone genuinely exceptional because they proved through their behavior that they don't know how to sustain one. The guilt about you follows them into every new romantic possibility, poisoning it before it begins. The guilt manifests as moments of unexpected, profound sadness that seem to come from nowhere, but are actually triggered by internal confrontation with what they did, surfacing without warning in middle of ordinary day. They're at grocery store and suddenly feel overwhelming sadness that brings tears to their eyes. They're driving and suddenly feel crushing weight of something they can't name. They're at work and suddenly feel like crying for no discernible reason. These unexpected emotional surges are guilt breaking through their defenses without warning, their conscience forcing them to feel what they've been trying to avoid feeling, the full weight of what they did to someone who loved them, and the recognition that this loss is permanent consequence of their own choices. They cannot identify the source of these surges because they've compartmentalized their guilt, but their emotional system knows exactly what's causing them and forces the feeling through, regardless of when or where they occur. What their daily torment over what they did means for you and your healing. The avoidant person's persistent daily suffering over what they did to you has specific implications for how you understand the relationship, for your own healing process, and for how you interpret their behavior and their silence. Understanding what their torment means helps you make peace with situation that otherwise feels unresolved and painful. Their daily torment means the connection you felt was real and significant, even though their behavior didn't consistently communicate this. Validating your perception that something meaningful existed between you. If what they did didn't matter to them, they wouldn't be tormented by it daily. If you didn't matter to them, replaying how they treated you wouldn't cause this level of suffering. The fact that they cannot stop thinking about what they did proves you were important, proves the relationship was significant, proves that despite behavior that communicated otherwise, you mattered more than their actions suggested. This validation serves your healing by confirming you weren't imagining the depth of connection, weren't fooling yourself about significance of what existed between you, weren't investing in something that was one-sided. It was real. It mattered. They know it mattered because they live with consequences of destroying it every single day. Their daily torment means their silence isn't because they've moved on or forgotten you, but because they're unable to face you with full weight of guilt they're carrying. You might have interpreted their silence after the relationship ended as indifference. They don't reach out. They don't acknowledge what happened. They don't express regret. But their silence is likely not indifference, but inability. Reaching out to you would require facing you with the guilt they're carrying, would require acknowledging specifically what they did and how they know it hurt you, would require vulnerability they've spent their life avoiding. Their silence is protective, protecting themselves from confrontation with your presence that would make their guilt unbearable to face directly. Understanding their silence as self-protective avoidance of guilt rather than as indifference or as having moved on reframes their behavior in ways that serve your understanding, even though it doesn't resolve your pain. Their daily torment means they're experiencing consequences of their patterns that they'll carry for significant period, regardless of whether they ever address their attachment wounds through therapy. The guilt and regret they're experiencing are natural consequences of destroying something valuable through their own choices. These consequences don't disappear with time. They persist and potentially intensify as clarity about what they lost grows. This persistence of consequences serves important function. It's the universe's version of the boundary you enforce by leaving, continuing to communicate that their behavior had real lasting cost, even though you're no longer present to enforce that boundary directly. They carry the consequences with them, and those consequences speak to them daily about what their patterns cost them. Whether this eventually motivates genuine change through therapy is uncertain. Some avoidants use this pain as catalyst for growth. Others simply suffer with it indefinitely. But the consequences exist regardless of whether they lead to transformation. Their daily torment means you can heal without needing them to acknowledge what they did, because their own internal acknowledgement is already occurring, even if it never reaches you. Part of healing after a relationship with avoidant requires some form of acknowledgement, knowing that what happened mattered, knowing that their behavior was wrong, knowing that you weren't imagining the hurt. Even though they'll likely never express this acknowledgement directly to you, understanding that it's happening internally, that they know what they did was wrong, that they're living with recognition of their behavior's impact. This can provide some of the closure acknowledgement provides, even though it arrives through understanding rather than through their words. You don't need them to tell you they regret what they did for their regret to be real. The knowledge that it's real, even without hearing it from them, can serve some of the healing function acknowledgement typically provides. Their daily torment means you should release yourself from any guilt about ending the relationship or from any belief that you could have done something differently to prevent what happened. Their suffering is about their choices and their patterns, not about anything you did or failed to do. You didn't cause their behavior. You didn't create their wounds. You didn't make them unable to sustain healthy relationship. You responded appropriately to treatment that was unacceptable by protecting yourself and leaving. Nothing you could have done differently would have changed their patterns. Those patterns are theirs to address through their own work. Releasing yourself from responsibility for what happened frees you from carrying guilt that isn't yours to carry while they carry guilt that is entirely theirs. Their torment about what they did is appropriate consequence of their choices. Your peace about your response is appropriate reward for protecting yourself. Their daily torment means that if they ever do reach out, whether now or months or years from now, it should be met with extreme caution, because reaching out doesn't necessarily indicate they've changed, only that their guilt has become unbearable enough to compel contact. If the avoidant reaches out expressing regret or wanting to talk or seeking forgiveness, understand this might be driven by their need to alleviate their own guilt rather than by genuine transformation of their patterns. Seeking forgiveness from you might be their attempt to silence their conscience rather than evidence they've done work to become a different person. Before considering any re-engagement, require evidence of sustained therapeutic work, demonstrated behavioral changes over a significant period, and concrete evidence they've addressed the attachment wounds that created their patterns. Reaching out while suffering from guilt is not the same as reaching out having done work to change. The former is about managing their pain. The latter is about having actually become capable of treating you differently. Their daily torment ultimately means you can find peace in knowing that what you lost wasn't lost without cost to them. They're paying for it every day. Not as punishment, but as natural consequence of destroying something they couldn't sustain. This knowledge doesn't eliminate your pain or speed your healing, but it provides framework for understanding that what happened wasn't one-sided loss where you suffered while they moved on unaffected. You both suffered. You suffered from their patterns while together. You suffered from the loss after. They suffered from guilt and regret that arrived after they fully understood what they destroyed. The pain is shared, even though it looks different in each of you. Yours is grief for relationship that could have been and wasn't. Theirs is guilt for destroying relationship that was. Neither of you escaped unharmed. Neither of you moved on without carrying weight of what happened. And understanding this shared suffering, understanding that not a single day passes where they don't confront what they did, can serve your healing by confirming what you already suspected. What existed between you mattered profoundly. What they did cost them profoundly. And the significance of what you shared is permanently etched in both of your lives, regardless of how the relationship ended or what either of you does going forward. They think about what they did every day. You know this now. Let this knowledge serve your peace rather than your pain, confirming that you mattered while freeing you to move forward toward life and love that doesn't require you to accept treatment that costs someone else daily torment because they couldn't sustain the love that was offered to them.